Hello, everybody. I wanted to welcome everyone to this career talk. Today, we're going to hear from Dr. Russell, the CIO of the Virginia Community College System.
So, good afternoon, everybody. My pleasure to be here, talk with you about higher education career opportunities. I have a background of almost 30 years in higher education and have worked in multiple institutions, from the big research institution to individual community colleges to now the Virginia Community College System. So I have a pretty long career in higher ed in the public sector. So I'm going to kind of focus on the community college system because it just makes me able to kind of highlight some of the career opportunities that are out there in IT. But certainly this isn't a comprehensive list. And depending on the types of institutions you're looking at, there are different job titles and opportunities there that might not be in the VCCS. So that said, let's jump into this. Can you see my screen? Am I sharing it here?
Not yet.
Not yet.
But
okay.
Sometimes there's a delay.
Right. Okay. And I am sharing two with you. Okay. Hope you got it now.
All right. I can see it right now.
Okay. Good. Good. All right. So if we just jump into this, we'll take a look at the agenda that I've put together here. Basically, I want to take you through a little bit of context so that you have a feel for the community college system. We call it the VCCS. And I'm going to go through a bit of our technology stack and our service areas that support that technology stack. And then I'm going to look at our organization chart, which I find is somewhat generic to higher education. I mean, you find some differences, but realistically, we're all a lot more alike than we probably would admit. And then I'm going to take you through the different teams in IT and talk about what they do and the types of skill sets that are required to do the jobs in those areas. And then just kind of touch base on some of the ones that I have the most problems filling in terms of vacancies. And then we'll open it up for questions after that. So obviously the first thing is this technology stack, which basically just defines your environment, right? So it basically looks at how we're constructed, right? So we don't run our own data centers in the VCCS. We run our data center out of what are called big colo centers. So they're big industrial strength DoD classified kind of data centers, with the hand scans and the retinal scans and the armed guards and security and stuff. And they put together a data center that there's no way we would want to afford to try and build. So what we do is we go in there and we rent something that looks like a cage, right? A cage space is actually what they call it. And they bill us for square footage and an electrical draw. That's how they figure out our bill. And so we support 23 colleges out of there with one shared service center and a central system office, which is where I'm at. Our technology stack then, you can take all the facilities stuff and put it into the colo center. That's why I specifically called that out. So I don't have engineers that have to worry about like fire suppression and HVAC cooling and electrical circuits and all that kind of stuff. It's all basically outsourced for us. And then what we've done is we've obviously put racks of equipment into that cage space. And it's primarily big Unix systems, right? They're big blade type servers. So they come in a chassis and then they're slotted machines. And they run Linux and other variants of Unix and Windows servers for the most part. And they're all virtualized machines, all using VMware. On top of that, what we've done is we've put a lot of Oracle enterprise solutions. So our HR, finance, and student systems are all from Oracle PeopleSoft. So, you know, those are systems that you'll get used to because it's like admissions, registration, financial aid, scheduling, all those types of things that you do as a college student running our student system. And then of course, HR is for all the faculty and staff and actually students when you're hired as employees too. And then of course, our budgeting and finance and all those kinds of things, payroll, are all running on those systems. And then in that data center, we also run a whole host of on-premise applications. Everything from, you know, a telephone system running VoIP to document management, analytics, identity management, so keeping track of who everybody is and allocating different resources to them. ITSM, which is the IT service management, which is like your help desk, but it's more than that because it has knowledge bases, ticketing systems, all those types of things built into it, right? And then a whole host of security applications, because when you're running all this stuff, obviously you've got to protect it because you've got personal information from people. And then attached to all of that, we run a huge number of cloud-based systems, and really almost too many to list. I think at last count, there were probably 40 some, but the main ones are like a portal that shows you what all the applications you have access to. We have our learning management system, which is a big Canvas implementation. Who Knew It, which is probably familiar to some of you. It's sort of like lynda.com, right? So, or Khan Academy, those types of things where you can go and learn and get certifications and things online. Obviously, we run a library system. We use Gmail and the G Suite of products, mainly on the student side of the house, but we also run for faculty and administration. We've got Office 365 and Microsoft Teams, all that kind of stuff. We run Zoom, which is what we're doing here, which is fantastic. Chrome River, which is a type of travel reimbursement tracking system, and a whole host of other applications. And that all combined and integrated basically puts together our technology stack, right? So all the things that we have in terms of applications and services. So our service areas are broken up. Again, like I said, it's kind of generic, and you'll see it on our org chart here in a second, but basically it's the Office of the CIO, which is a group that works closely with me and does all the IT governance and management. It's where all the decisions are made about what we're gonna buy and how we're gonna buy it, and vetting and all those kinds of efforts happen in that area. There's an application support team. Most of the applications folks, they're actually spending a lot more time doing configuration work than actually coding work, right? The integrations team, the next one down, spends a lot of time doing coding work. Operations and infrastructure, obviously we run a big statewide network that connects our 40 primary college locations together. And then of course we've got, you know, the smaller lands at each one of the campuses, and in the system office, the shared services center. We run a big security and compliance operation. And then we have some shared services that are specific to IT. Those are probably more unique compared to what you'd find out at other institutions. And I think it's probably because we are a rather large system. So with 23 colleges, you have opportunities to share some things that you might not share if you're, you know, a single college at maybe 1 or 2 locations. So with that said, here's a copy of our org chart where we've just extracted the names and position numbers off of it. And you can see it's very generic to the state. So, you know, the state takes IT titles, and, you know, they call you a tech specialist 3, which could be a database analyst, it could be a Unix engineer, it could be all these different things, but it's just basically a way to do pay scale stuff. But this is how we're laid out. And what I was going to do is the service areas that I was alluding to earlier, like the gray boxes, right? The primary service areas, if you will. And then under the two, whatever that color is, sort of an orange, are other areas. So those are the areas we're going to focus on, and those are the primary service areas. So you see there, Office of the CIO, applications integration, enterprise operations, which is really operations and infrastructure. And infrastructure is over operations, as you can see, because infrastructure also has all of the security and compliance and shared services with the colleges in their purview. So that said, if we look at one of these, like the Office of the CIO, obviously with 23 colleges, we have a pretty comprehensive governance structure, right? Because we need to have people included from all 23 colleges, and that takes a lot of work to coordinate and manage that effort. And you have to have a pretty good knowledge of IT to help coordinate those efforts, right? Because the people that are coming to the table in terms of governance and decision making, they're mostly people from the business side of the house who are laying out requirements, right? And talking about what their needs are, and then IT is coming back with solutions and helping craft a way to procure the right solution to deal with whatever the business problem might be, right? And obviously, when you look at this, so you see portfolio and project management, actually having IT project managers is a fantastic thing. It doesn't require knowledge of coding per se, but obviously any background in IT helps you do IT project management, because, you know, at project management, you're basically tracking all of the efforts to install an application or upgrade an application, or usually these are our larger, you know, $1 million projects. So usually have, you know, 20 to 50 people you're trying to coordinate. And some of them are coding, some of them are subject matter experts, some of them are, you know, business experts, right? And you're kind of playing liaison to all of these different groups to coordinate the work that they're doing to get the IT work done according to the specifications of the business side of the house, right? We've also got an IT procurement arm, because we do a lot of shared procurements. And then we do chargebacks, because you get economies of scale, right? 23 colleges buying something, you get a much better price than one college buying something. So we help do those kinds of procurements and negotiation out of that Office of the CIO, as well as all of the IT strategic planning, which is enterprise-wide, right? And then all of the IT budget management specific to all of our big enterprise systems. And then the other part of that, if you go back to the org chart a second, you'll see that it's got business analyst folks, right? And these are business process improvement people. So they have backgrounds in IT, either configuring systems or programming systems, but they also have knowledge of certain functions like HR, finance, registration, admissions, student services type things, so counseling, behavior management, whatever, you know, and these are all tied to different applications. And so what the business analysts do is they help us figure out how to tie all the applications together and optimize our workflow, if you will, so that it works smoothly between different packages. And that's kind of why we call it business process improvement. So the next one up, and I probably should have put this slide back in here a couple of times. So we went through the Office of the CIO. Now we're going to jump over to the second one here under the Applications and Integration team. And let's see, so Applications and Integration team. So obviously, this is where you see a lot of the coding, right? Although if you look at it, we buy a lot of what they call COTS, which is common off-the-shelf systems, right? Where it's like going and buying something and loading it to your PC, and you got to figure out how to configure it and get it to run right. But there's not a lot of coding involved in that. sometimes, depending on what you're buying and what you're putting in. So if you're putting in a PeopleSoft application, you're probably coding a lot of things to make it work with your database, right? You're writing some modifications, right? In terms of identity and access management, that also happens in here, because what you're doing is you're controlling who has access to what in the various systems, right? Again, and I only listed a handful of some of the applications just so you could get a feel for the work. So document management, you'd think there's not a whole lot of programming in document management. It's mostly configuration, getting it all set up. But then you got to set up all the workflow so that documents go to the right places in sequence and are approved or cataloged along those lines. And actually, when you set up that workflow, it's almost its own little programming language. So I call it configuration, and actually the applications will call it configuration. But if you know how to program, you're going to be really good at doing that kind of work. So again, you know, there's a lot of ways to get that skill set that can help you do that. ITSM, again, is the help desk, right? Ticketing system, knowledge base. We've got document repositories in there. There's some project management stuff in there. And there's a lot more that we could actually tie into our service management effort. There's a service catalog of all the services we offer and what they cost in terms of, you know, to either to an individual, to an institution, or to the enterprise. And then on the other side of that are the folks that really concentrate on the integration and middleware, which is for us is probably the heaviest lift in terms of all of our coding, right? Because these are the people who are coding the APIs or component interfaces, right? Where a web interface is getting packets of information, looking at that, reformatting it so it actually meets what another system is looking for, sends it into that system, and then the data can flow back and forth because of that interface that's been built there. It's almost like writing the translator, if you will, between different packages. So a lot of heavy coding in that area, as well as the web and HTML types of coding too. The other place we see a lot of integration and coding work is with single sign-on, right? Because you want to make it look, you want to put stuff in front of people so that when they click on it, it automatically can figure out who they are, authenticate them, and give them access to what they're supposed to have access to. So we have people who spend quite a bit of time doing that type of work, right? And of course, I don't mean to say that the coding is a lot heavier lift than the configuration work, because when you're doing configuration work and it doesn't work quite the way you planned, it's sort of like when you've written a program and you're not getting the output you expect, right? Because the troubleshooting of that, it can be incredibly complicated, right? And most of these systems that we're doing configuration work on are large, very intricate systems. So the configuration can be quite challenging at times. So I don't mean to mean one of those is more difficult than the other. They're just different processes that need to be done, if you will. The next set, and I'll jump back again to that slide so you can see where we are, because we're jumping over now to the operations center, which is the next gray one over, but it's got infrastructure in it too, because it's underneath that assistant vice chancellor there, that's in the orange, sort of orange colored box. Let's see, no, I went the wrong way. And we are operations and infrastructure. So again, this is a pretty generic layout, right? So we have a whole systems engineering group. They do quite a bit of coding and scripting. They live in a Unix and Windows world. They are primarily dealing with a lot of stuff in virtual machines because we've virtualized everything. In fact, we run an entire platform in VMware that's infrastructure as a service. So think of that as like Amazon Web Services, right? You want to spin up a server, you can get on Amazon and configure it and spin it up, and 30 minutes after you've done that, you're running a server and a service on the internet. Well, we've done that for the 23 colleges so that basically they can come into a portal, configure a server type machine, Windows, Unix, put an application on it, and it's all virtualized, and it lets us share a lot of the infrastructure and hardware costs, so it saves us quite a bit of money. And of course, it's all running in those big colo data centers so that we don't have to worry about, okay, we've added another 20 servers, now the air conditioner can't keep up, or we don't have enough electricity, which sounds funny but are very common problems in university data centers. So let's see here. And obviously, if you're interested in playing with any of these things and you haven't seen them, so like there is a lot of free versions of VMware or virtual machine software out there, and as well as versions of Linux like Ubuntu and CentOS that you can readily download and configure. And since you're coding, I imagine you've already played with some of that. But if you haven't, a good place to play. And then the next group is our database administrators, right? So they do a lot of reporting, coding, configuration work. We're primarily Oracle, Microsoft SQL, and MySQL. MySQL being an open source software that you can, again, download and work with. And the language that they're using is SQL, right? Sort query language. So, you can do all kinds of reporting using that. You can do extracts of data, imports of data, all that kind of thing is happening at the database level with this team, right? And of course, they're also configuring the databases so that they're ready for applications to be put on top of them. So they do a ton of configuration work, as well as the coding and reporting types of applications that they focus on. And then there's a network team. Like I said, we run a large statewide network for our 40 primary campuses. And then of course they all have networks on the college campus as well. So we have a big private, what you'd call a WAN, because we control all of that. And then the LANs are pretty much managed in a decentralized fashion. So each one of the colleges will also have network engineers, as well as the people in the system office helping. Our networking team is actually responsible for our phone systems. So they run a voice over IP system across our network. They do a ton of security work, and they put it behind firewalls, but also behind things like load balancers and that kind of thing. And then of course they put in all types of monitoring and scripting and everything else, because one of the things they're primarily concerned with is that only addresses are coming in and accessing those machines that should be, right? And that they're authenticating properly and that kind of thing. And then there's another group that does mostly desktop support. So they're the people that, do the laptops and desktops, and they're loading a ton of different applications on them. So they spend a lot of time doing device configuration and support for the entire office and enterprise, right? And then they're also the primary people that run the help desk, so that when you do have a problem with your own personal desktop, laptop, these are the people that you contact to get support. And these other groups are all providing support too, to the colleges and to specific user groups, right? So like if you're in the analytics team, you might have a problem that, is being caused by a system. It could be something in the database. It could even be something in the network where it's not letting you access something. You never really know. So we've got all of these folks doing that kind of support as well. And then the last, second to the last group over is actually our information security and compliance office. So just kind of what you would expect, right? They're doing access control. They're the people who are creating accounts, they're deleting accounts, They're monitoring all the systems. They're looking for anomalies, anything that looks funny or jumps out to them. They're scanning, making sure that things are being patched and updated properly. They have scanners that do penetration testing. So they're basically seeing if they can hack into the systems. You can see why a lot of people kind of like that job. And then they also do risk assessment on all our big enterprise systems. They run things like phishing campaigns. You know, they'll run these campaigns. They're pretty slick, right? Where even IT professionals, you see a good number of us that'll click on some of these phishing campaigns, and you know, kind of hang our head like, oh, why did I click on that? And of course, you know, going along with the phishing campaigns, they're doing this constant security awareness training. So when you look at that security team, it's interesting because a lot of them are very policy and program driven, right? And then there's a whole nother team that is very technology driven, right? Understanding how to scan a system, read the results, find false positives and see what really is a problem, what really isn't. Those types of skill sets. And again, programming is a great foundation for all that work, but not required for other parts of it. And then, of course, we've got our security program management area, which is more about compliance, right? So they're the ones doing security reviews, right? They're almost like a type of audit where they're going in and saying, okay, show me that you've done this, and we've got, you know, a whole, well, it's a whole program. So it's a slew of hundreds of different criteria that we review to make sure that you're staying secure and compliant with our program. We're running an ISO 2700, I believe, program. And that's just like there's different security programs, and to be compliant with the state, you have to be running one of them. It happens the state runs something from NIST that's quite a bit different than what we do, but very similar in what it's trying to accomplish. ARMIX is a type of DR, business continuity planning effort that the state requires all agencies do. So we have a team that's kind of skilled up in that. And then, of course, we're audited internally and externally pretty much every year. So as we're going through all these security reviews, compliance reviews, we're also grabbing all these artifacts and documenting everything so that when the internal or external auditors show up, we're ready to go and assist the colleges or the system office in getting through their audit efforts. And then this is the area that we're kind of unique. And I think it's probably because we have 23 colleges that are all in the same system. Some are large, some are very small, and they run on pretty lean budgets, right? And so two very expensive positions to fill are like mine, right? The CIO, and at the college level, we have CIOs, we have CTOs, we have directors, and some of them will actually just be like the lead network engineer will take on one of these roles as default, right? Because they don't have that position. And so what we did was we came up with a program, well, programs actually, 2 of them so far, to share resources. So we'll do a campus technology officer, and we'll split it between 2 colleges, right? And it acts as that senior IT officer for the college, right? It's basically focused on the instruction and doing college infrastructure and support, primarily because we run one big ERP. You know, the PeopleSoft effort is for all 23 colleges, the system office, and the shared services center. So when you get to the college level, if it's a large college, they might have folks that are also supporting those types of applications, but at some of the mid-level, smaller level, they don't. So the IT folks are basically running the college network, labs, AV stuff, doing the desktop support and rollout. They're doing a lot of training. There's specific groups that are doing the library or instructional technology, which is really about helping faculty stay online, or rather not stay online, but get courseware online and do design work for them and help make sure that it runs the way they want it to. So, and then on the other side of that, we also share security officers, right? And we do, these are actually ratios. So we'll hire one ISO, but it'll handle 3 colleges. But realistically, there's a team of like 5 ISOs and they're handling 15 enterprises, and the 5 of them all work together, but we do it at a ratio of 1 to 3 colleges, right? So that's really kind of a clarification there. And these are the folks that are doing basically the same thing that I described earlier with our on-premise crew, right? They're doing the security reviews, they're doing risk assessments, a lot of awareness training. They also coordinate the penetration testing and all manner of things that fall under that security effort. So again, this is kind of a odd thing that you would find just in a system like ours. But again, like you wouldn't find research computing, the big scientific number crunching hardware in our environment. But you go to a Virginia Tech or any kind of research institution, they're going to have a lot of that kind of thing. So as much as it's kind of a generic setup, you do find some differences. So from there, I just wanted to jump into really what hiring challenges I've been facing here, just to give you an idea of the job market out there. So obviously, the developer positions that are in that integration and middleware being a type of integration, but it's more structured, I guess, is probably the way, maybe not more structured, but it's more defined, right? So it comes with a whole set of things to tie this package to this package, whereas an API is, okay, here's the programming interface specifications, both sides program to it, and then things work properly. On the middleware side, it's a package that you buy and configure, but there's also programming involved in that. The second one is just our PeopleSoft developers. As a lot of these administrative systems have matured, they're moving to the cloud. People are picking up the cloud skill sets, which is a different set of programming tools. So it makes it kind of hard to go out and find people who want to specialize in like PeopleSoft programming these days. But I say that with a caveat, right? Because when I was doing programming, I programmed in COBOL, something that you've probably never even seen, or if you have, it's some old piece of code, which makes sense. But if you look at the federal government and a lot of state governments, the vast majority of the systems are still written in COBOL, and we're still trying to get them translated into newer, more modern languages. So, the idea that PeopleSoft will be gone in 10 years is probably a bit iffy. Like I said, even the state of Virginia, their big HR and finance packages are running on an old mainframe with COBOL code on them. And they're in the process of moving all of that into a PeopleSoft environment, very similar to what we're running in terms of HR and finance. So there are opportunities there. And remember, as you progress through your career, right? Even if you come up through a PeopleSoft environment, you're still learning finance or HR or a student information system, and all that knowledge will just transfer into some other language on some other platform at some future date, right? And that's really the way you want to be looking at this kind of thing. Same with the Unix systems engineer, right? So now you see the infrastructure as a service, you see the Amazon Web Services, right? And everybody's thinking that those are where those system administrator jobs are going, but they're not moving quite as fast as you would anticipate, because a lot of companies are very worried about their intellectual property and the stuff that they're storing on those systems, and they don't really want them in a cloud environment. They're still worried mostly around security. but they tend to put a lot of new applications in the cloud, which is sort of what we've done at the VCCS. I think that's, a bit of a trend, but I think, some people are moving faster than others in terms of getting their stuff into the cloud. But I don't think you're going to see the on-premise stuff going away anytime soon. The business analyst, this is an interesting one because it really is just kind of a logical thinker, right? Somebody who just thinks logically and can map out business process and workflow types of applications. And obviously, if you have a background in programming, it lends itself very well to this type of work, right? Obviously, you need to understand how maybe the HR system works, but that's something you can learn pretty readily, right? But mapping how an HR process works in that system is kind of a key element to what these people do. And for us, since we've got 23 colleges, what's interesting is they're all in the same instance of the same software doing business differently. And we're trying to get them to come around to having a single or maybe two at the most best practices for doing things in a certain way, rather than trying to do them 23 different ways, because then when we go to upgrade anything, it's a real nightmare for IT to try and figure out, how to upgrade 23 different business processes instead of one or two. So that's an ongoing effort that we'll be doing for the foreseeable future. And then the last one I listed here is the project managers, right? It's an interesting challenge because you don't really see degrees in project management. People go get certified in project management, right? And there's different types of project management, Agile, Scrum, those types of things. But you have to actually manage projects before you can get the certification. And so it's kind of a little bit of a catch-22 that you need to build into that type of role. But again, learning how project management works, and it's like learning a complicated software program in a way. So again, having that coding background will definitely play to helping you move into that kind of role if that becomes of interest to you. So that's kind of my overview of higher education, public sector, IT in a very quick nutshell. So remember, this isn't like a comprehensive list of all these positions, but just kind of an overview of a generic model as much as anything else, even though I did kind of focus with the VCCS as my main point there. So all that said, let's open this up for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that presentation. We already have one question that came in already. It's from an attendee who's a recent graduate of application development. That's what their bachelor's program was in, with a background in education as a behavior specialist. What advice do you have for applying to IT careers in higher education? And I guess we can extend this beyond just this attendee specific circumstances and just in general for students from various backgrounds.
Right, so you've got a background in education and in coding computer science. Right, so, to me, that's where you've got all the building blocks to take a look at all the areas that we were kind of talking about or overviewing, and kind of see which ones really are of the most interest to you. Because in terms of getting into an entry-level position, you could probably get into pretty much any of those, right? So if you want to be an instructional technologist helping faculty get their courseware online, right? You've got the subject matter expertise in education, but you've got a coding background, right? And that means you're going to learn software packages very easy compared to most faculty. I don't mean to put the faculty down, but they're used to a different world, right? Most of them came out of teaching in a classroom and have slowly moved into the world of online, and they've never had that IT coding or even learning complicated software packages. So for them, just trying to get into the learning management system and figure out how to make it do what they want, or get their material into it and then get the material to do what they want it to do, whether it's, video or some kind of animation or whatever. Even quizzes and tests can go in there, right? You could get into something like that pretty easily. But if that's not of interest to you and you're more interested in doing, more heavy coding work, right? Having the background in education means that you have a good feel for, the types of processes that happen, right? So an education background, how teaching happens, right? How learning happens, right? So that can easily be applied to pretty much anything in a learning management system, right?
Awesome. Thank you for that answer. We have another very interesting question. It's from an attendee who's read about COBOL in library books, and they were wondering what's happening to the servers that the code is being translated from COBOL. What's it getting translated into?
So, I think for the most part, people are trying to put it on these big ERP systems, right? From like Oracle or SAP. So like PeopleSoft was a product and Oracle bought it. And Oracle's building products in the cloud to mimic what PeopleSoft is doing on-prem, right? So like the state, they have a mainframe and it's supported by an outsourcing agreement to a private company, Unisys, and all their COBOL code is running on it. So they are trying to translate that all into a PeopleSoft environment, right? So if you look at that, that means you have to look at how data is structured in the COBOL world, which is, basically you build three-dimensional arrays, right? And then you look at an Oracle, which is a relational database, and you have to map the data that's here in this old system to the data where you're going to put the data in the new system, right? And that's where a lot of the programming and translation happens, right? So it becomes part of that configuring of the new system. So like I said, when I say configuration work, it's not really that it's any easier than programming work. And sometimes it's even more challenging depending on the environment that you're in. For the federal government, I think a lot of their applications are very niche specific. So they would probably be writing them into something else, right? Like I think they were writing COBOL to PL1, to C#, to, all kinds of different languages. Right now, I would see them probably looking at things like Python, and those types of applications. But there's such a heavy lift in custom coding applications of that size that they're really looking for companies to do that, right? Or at least to do the vast majority of it. And then they're figuring out how to migrate onto those platforms, sort of like what the state's doing, getting into PeopleSoft, and then figuring out what they have to custom program to make it do what they actually need it to do in some respects.
All right, thank you. We have another question with someone who is interested in where they can find information about new job positions opening up. Is the best way to apply to these positions through college or university websites, or how would you recommend going about a job search?
So for the state, and for a lot of states, they have a single portal, right? So you can take your resume and put it into the state recruiting system, and they make that available to all the state agencies, right? And then what you can do is you can look for openings that come up, and with a click, you can basically send your resume, right? And then, you can have a cover letter that you would attach, right? Right now, that system, I believe, is called People Admin. And so as a state agency, what we do is we have a recruiting system that we've put out there. It happens to be the same one the state's using, but we also put our stuff into the state system. And we're always wanting, you know, the higher ed jobs or higher ed careers or monster.com or whatever online job repository. You know, they go and they crawl the web and they find all of these things, and that's how they come up with the information that they're posting. And we think the state system probably has a lot more visibility than ours. So we definitely put our stuff in there so that they can find it, because, you know, obviously we want as many applicants to our jobs as we can possibly get.
Awesome. I guess we'll wait a few more minutes to see if any more questions come in. But in the meantime, a question that I have that I think is interesting is, what inspires you about tech today, about the world of tech today?
Oh my goodness. So probably the most inspiring thing is there is never a dull moment in technology. I mean, we're basically kind of the key to almost every function in any organization, right? Because everybody is relying on IT to do something. And even right now, we're so backed up in work. That's kind of the stressful part, right? Is that you can't do everything for everybody. So it gets a little backed up at times, but the constant ability to go help people with business problems, and the constant changing of technology, right? Because it just keeps getting better and better. I mean, before COVID, we had started playing with Zoom, and we had standardized on it. And just in the time between when we standardized on it and what we're talking on right now, this platform has morphed into something so much better than it was in a very short amount of time. And I would say that many of the other packages have too. In fact, if you look at Microsoft Teams now, they're doing the same types of video conferencing and phone calls and all kinds of capabilities that they either wanted to charge extra for before or weren't in existence. So now they're just kind of, you know, showing up as value add, if you will. So it makes life exciting.
Yes, definitely. We have another question about COBOL, asking, do people still get certificates in it or learn it in order to get these translating jobs?
So this is kind of interesting, right? So, you know, it's kind of hard for me to recommend somebody go learn to program in COBOL, but there are so few COBOL programmers that on my LinkedIn from like 20 years ago, it says in my resume that I'm a COBOL programmer, and I get headhunters hitting me all the time. It's like, you see that I'm a CIO and I have all these other things that I'm doing. Why would you think I want to program in COBOL? And don't you realize that they could probably pick any one of the 20 participants in this conversation right now and train them to do COBOL better than they could have me doing it in 6 months, right? So there are certainly books out there. I think there are actually boot camps out there. I would have to go look, but it's certainly worth Googling and seeing, because it's not a dead skill set, and it's actually a very high paying programming job these days, because everybody thinks they're learning something that's going to work them out of a job, right? Because they're thinking that the COBOL is going to go away. The only problem is you have to remember, it took the federal government and state governments a good probably 30 or 40 years to write all that code. And so to think that they're just going to be able to jump out of it in any real quick fashion is probably a dream. I'm sure people do dream about it every day, especially the people running the projects. But I can tell you that the system that is running finance and HR on that mainframe, when I first started my IT career in Virginia in 1984, that system was running. And they have been working on replacing it since around 2000. So it's been a long, drawn out effort. So, you know, and even when they're done, like I said, there are so many other states and federal government and departments, agencies that have a lot of this code in place, that it really isn't a bad thing to go learn. I mean, and for a coder, it's just another language you have on your resume, right? It'll probably be the wordiest language you ever come up with, because obviously, you know, the difference in coding now is, you know, it would take you 3 pages of long drawn out English-like code to do a very simple thing in COBOL, where you could probably do that in 3 short lines, you know, in C#. Right? But at the same time, you know, there's nobody who knows that COBOL code. I think the state's even down to 4 or 5, which is why they have hired consultants to come in and help them with that. So it's certainly worth a look.
I really want to thank you so much for doing this call. I don't think we have any more questions right now. I guess we can wait like 30 more seconds. But it was really awesome to hearing such like a wide and detailed discussion of IT. And I really appreciate the time you've taken to do this talk today in your busy day.
Yeah, well, my pleasure, and thanks everybody for participating.
All right. Well, I think this is a wrap. Thank you, everybody. Have an awesome day.
Thank you.